The dust was a living thing on Jedediah Stone's ranch. It coated his tongue, settled in the lines around his eyes, and clung to the memory of his wife, Sarah. Her grave, marked by a simple wooden cross on the hill overlooking their small, parched homestead, was the only clean place in his world. Every morning, he'd take a damp cloth and wipe the dust from the name he'd carved into the wood himself. It was a ritual, a promise. "Just another day, Sarah," he'd murmur, his voice rough from disuse. "Still holding on, just like I said I would." He was a man carved from the unforgiving land itself, lean, weathered, with hands calloused from work that never seemed to end. But beneath the grit, there was a quiet sorrow. Sarah had seen beauty in this valley. She believed that with enough faith and hard work, they could build a paradise here, a place where life didn't just survive, but thrived. Jedediah didn't see the paradise anymore. He only saw the work, the endless, grinding work of keeping a promise to a ghost. His world had shrunk to the size of this 200-acre plot. The well, the cabin, the collapsing barn, and the hill where Sarah rested. That was it. That was everything. Until the day Bartholomew Corbin rode in. Corbin wasn't like the dust. He was a storm cloud, dark and imposing, blotting out the sun. He arrived with 5 men, their horses pristine, their saddles gleaming with silver conchos. Corbin himself was dressed in a fine black coat, looking utterly out of place and yet completely in charge. He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who owned everything he stood on, or intended to. "Mr. Stone," Corbin said, his voice as smooth and polished as a river stone. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were like chips of cold slate, and they were busy assessing every board, every fence post, every sign of decay on Jedediah's ranch. "I am Bartholomew Corbin." "I believe you know why I'm here." Jedediah stood his ground, his hand resting on the handle of the axe he'd been using to split wood. "I reckon I do. And the answer's the same as it was last month and the month before that. The land's not for sale." Corbin's smile widened slightly. "Persistence, Mr. Stone. A commendable quality. But there are different kinds of persistence. There is the kind that builds empires, and the kind that leads a man to ruin, clinging to a memory." "Your wife, Sarah, was it? A lovely woman. She had vision. But vision without capital, well, it's just a daydream." A hot rage, sharp and sudden, flared in Jedediah's chest. "You leave her name out of your mouth." Corbin held up his hands in mock surrender. "My apologies. I mean no disrespect to the departed. I am simply a businessman. This valley has a future, a grand one. A railroad is coming through. I am consolidating the land to ensure we all prosper. Your plot is the final, crucial piece. It controls the headwaters of the creek. Your 200 acres are worth more than all the other 5,000 combined. I am prepared to be generous. $10 an acre. That's $2,000. More money than you'll see in a lifetime of breaking your back on this rock pile." Jedediah's jaw was tight. "This rock pile is my home. It was her home. You can't put a price on that." The politeness in Corbin's face vanished, like a mask falling away. The storm had arrived. "Everything has a price, Mr. Stone. You see, I am a man who appreciates leverage. While you've been busy talking to a ghost on a hill, I've been busy in the town of Redemption. I had a long, productive chat with the president of the Redemption Savings and Loan. It turns out your late wife's vision was funded by a rather significant mortgage, a mortgage that as of 9 o'clock this morning, I now own." He reached into his coat and produced a folded sheaf of papers. He didn't hand them to Jedediah. He simply let them drop into the dust at his feet. "That is a foreclosure notice, Mr. Stone. You are 30 days in arrears. According to the terms of the note, you have 30 days from this notice to produce the full outstanding amount of $500. If you cannot, the land, the cabin, the well, everything reverts to the lien holder, me. The offer of $2,000 still stands, but only for the next 24 hours. After that, I'll get the land for a fraction of the cost. The choice is yours." Corbin mounted his horse, looking down at Jedediah with an expression of absolute final power. 30 days, Mr. Stone. The clock is ticking." He and his men turned and rode away, leaving Jedediah alone with the notice lying in the dirt, the dust already beginning to reclaim it. He stared at it, the words a death sentence for Sarah's dream. $500. He might as well have been asked to lasso the moon. He had $7 to his name. The first 10 days were a blur of quiet desperation. Jedediah rode into Redemption, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. The town had once been a friendly place. He and Sarah had helped raise the church spire. He'd shared drinks with the men who now averted their eyes when he walked past. He went to the general store first. Mr. Abernathy, a portly man who had always given him a warm welcome, was suddenly very busy counting inventory. "Jedediah," he said, not looking up. "Heard you had a visit from Mr. Corbin. I need supplies, Henry, on credit, just till I can sell my calf in the fall." Abernathy finally met his gaze, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "I can't, Jed. I'm sorry. Mr. Corbin, he consolidated my debts too. He owns my books now. I can't extend credit without his approval, and he left a very specific list of names who are denied." Jedediah felt the blood drain from his face. He wasn't just being foreclosed on. He was being strangled. His next stop was the sheriff's office. Sheriff Miller was a thin, weaselly man, polishing a badge that seemed too big for his chest. He listened to Jedediah's story with a practiced air of boredom. "It's a legal matter, Jed," Miller said, shrugging. "A contract is a contract. Mr. Corbin owns the note. You owe the money. My hands are tied." "He's trying to starve me out, Sheriff. He's turning the whole town against me. Can't arrest a man for being a savvy businessman," Miller said, turning his back. "You've got 20 days left. I suggest you find a way to get the money." Jedediah walked out into the street, the sense of isolation a physical cloak. He saw whispers behind cupped hands. He saw men who once called him friend cross the street to avoid him. Corbin hadn't just bought his debt. He had bought the town's soul. Jedediah was an outcast, a pariah. He returned to the ranch with nothing but the dust on his coat. The silence of the cabin was deafening. The ticking of the clock was the only sound he could hear, each tick a hammer blow against the foundation of his world. The days bled into one another. 18 days left, 15, 12. Each morning he'd wipe the dust from Sarah's cross and his voice would be a little quieter. "I'm trying, Sarah. Lord, I'm trying." Back in Redemption, in the private suite above the saloon that he now owned, Bartholomew Corbin swirled a glass of brandy. His foreman, a hulking, scar-faced man named Pike, stood before him. "Stone's not budging," Pike growled. "He's tougher than he looks, or stupider. He's been rationing his food. Tried to dig a new well up canyon when his main one got muddied." Pike grinned, revealing a row of yellow teeth. "Didn't find anything but rock." Corbin took a slow sip. "Toughness can be broken, Pike. Stupidity can be punished. But a man with a righteous cause, however foolish, is dangerous. We need to do more than isolate him. We need to make him a monster in the eyes of the people. We need to give them a reason to hate him, a reason to fear him." Corbin stared out the window, a thoughtful, cruel glimmer in his eyes. "There have been Apache raids up north. People are jumpy. Fear is a currency, Pike, and I want to spend it. Go back out there. Watch him. The moment he makes a mistake, the moment he does anything that can be twisted, I want to know. We're not just going to take his land. We're going to erase him." It was on the morning of the 10th day, with the deadline looming like a hangman's noose, that Jedediah found him. The sun was barely cresting the ridge, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Jedediah was heading to the well when he saw it, a shape huddled near the trough. At first he thought it was a dead coyote, but then it moved. He approached cautiously, his old rifle in hand. It was a man, an Apache, by his buckskin leggings and the single feather tied in his long black hair. He was young, rail-thin, and unconscious. His face was contorted in pain, his lips cracked and blistered. He was dying of thirst and starvation. Jedediah froze. The world stopped. He heard Corbin's voice in his head. He saw the fearful eyes of the townsfolk. He knew what helping this man would mean. It wasn't just foolish. It was social suicide. Corbin would use it. He would twist it. Jedediah, the stubborn rancher, would become Jedediah, the Indian lover, the traitor. He could walk away, leave him to the buzzards. No one would ever know. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Then he looked at the man's face again. He didn't see an Apache. He didn't see a threat. He saw a human being in desperate need. He saw the kind of person Sarah would have helped without a second thought. And in that moment, his own survival mattered less than his wife's memory. He lowered his rifle, went inside, and came back with a cup of water and the last piece of bread he owned. He knelt, lifted the man's head gently, and poured a few drops of water onto his cracked lips. The man's eyes flickered open. They were dark and unfocused, but they were alive. Jedediah broke the bread in half and placed a piece in the man's hand. The Apache looked at the bread, then at Jedediah, a flicker of understanding in his gaze. He didn't eat it. He just held it, his fingers curling around the stale crust as if it were the most precious thing in the world. For the next week, Jedediah nursed the stranger back from the brink. The man, whose name he learned was Cale, never spoke a word of English, communicating only through gestures and quiet nods. He was a silent, watchful presence in the lonely cabin. Jedediah shared his dwindling food, cleaned the man's festering wounds, and felt a strange, unspoken companionship that eased the crushing weight of his isolation. But the clock did not stop. 3 days left. The ranch was in shambles. The sabotage had continued. His fence was cut, allowing his last few chickens to wander off. A small fire had been set near his barn one night, forcing him to waste precious water putting it out. It was a war of 1,000 cuts, and Jedediah was bleeding out. He hit his lowest point on the final night. With only tomorrow left before Corbin would arrive to claim everything, Jedediah slumped down by Sarah's grave, the fight gone from him. The moon was a cold, silver dollar in the sky. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I failed you. I failed us. There's nothing left. Corbin wins. He gets the land, the water. He gets it all. It's over." He buried his face in his hands, a single, hot tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. This was it, the absolute end, a false dawn before the final darkness. He sat there for what felt like an eternity, lost in his despair. When he finally looked up, Cale was standing beside him. The Apache had been a silent observer to his suffering, but now there was a new intensity in his eyes. He pointed a finger at Jedediah, then at himself. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear, the English words perfect and unaccented. "You are a good man, Jedediah Stone." Jedediah stared, stunned into silence. Kyle knelt beside him. "I have watched you. I have seen them try to break you. I have seen you share your last food with an enemy. You honor this land. You honor the memory of the one who rests here." He gestured to the grave. "My people believe that the land gives back to those who honor it." He stood up. "Your deed, the paper that describes your home. Show me the boundaries." Confused and still reeling from the shock of hearing Cale speak, Jedediah fumbled for the worn deed in his cabin. He brought it out and, by the pale moonlight, traced the lines for the Apache. Cale studied it intently, then pointed to a section on the eastern edge of the property, an area marked by a distinctive cluster of 3 large granite boulders that Sarah had always called the 3 Sisters. "Here," Cale said. "Your wife, she loved this place. It was her favorite spot to watch the sunset," Jedediah said, his voice hoarse. "Take your shovel," Cale commanded. "Dig between the sisters." A wild, desperate hope, something he hadn't felt in weeks, flickered inside Jedediah. He grabbed his shovel and they walked to the boulders. The ground was hard, packed clay and rock. He dug for nearly an hour, his muscles screaming, sweat pouring down his face. His shovel was about to break. He was about to give up. And then he heard it. A solid metallic clink. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with his bare hands. He pulled out a rock, and beneath it something gleamed in the moonlight. It was a thick, jagged vein of yellow rock, shot through with seams of pure, unmistakable gold. It wasn't just a nugget. It was the heart of a deposit, rich, dense, more than he had ever imagined. He pulled a piece free. It was heavy in his hand, cool to the touch. It was salvation. It was enough to pay Corbin 5 times over. It was enough to rebuild, to hire men, to buy supplies, to make Sarah's dream a reality. He fell back laughing, the sound raw and unfamiliar. He looked from the gold in his hand to Cale, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down his face. "Cale, you saved me. You saved everything." Cale simply smiled, a serene and knowing expression on his face. "The land gives back." Jedediah stood up, holding the chunk of gold aloft as the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains, casting its light on his prize. He had won. Against all odds, he had won. A voice, cold and smooth as polished steel, echoed from the ridge above them. "An impressive discovery, Mr. Stone." Truly. Jedediah's blood ran cold. He looked up. Standing on the ridgeline, silhouetted against the rising sun, was Bartholomew Corbin. Beside him stood Pike and a dozen other men, each one leveling a rifle directly at him. Corbin wasn't here for the foreclosure. He was here for this. Corbin gave a slow, predatory smile. "I must thank you for doing all the hard work. It seems my 30-day deadline was perfectly timed. Now, according to Section 4 of the Redemption Mining Charter, a charter I helped write, by the way, any significant mineral discovery made on mortgage property legally belongs to the lien holder until the debt is settled in full. And as of this moment, Mr. Stone, I hold the lien. Jedediah's heart, which had soared moments before, plummeted into an abyss of despair so deep he felt the air leave his lungs. He looked from the gold in his hand to the rifles on the ridge, and back again. The world had given him a miracle, only for the devil to claim it. That's right, Mr. Stone, Corbin continued, savoring the moment. While you were playing nursemaid to that stray, my men have been watching. They saw you find this little treasure, and my charter is ironclad. This gold will build my empire, and you will be a footnote, a stubborn fool who lost everything. Pike, relieve Mr. Stone of my property. Pike grinned, his scarred face a mask of brutal glee. He started down the rocky slope, two of his men following. Jedediah's grip tightened on the piece of gold, his knuckles white. He had not come this far to be broken now. He stood his ground, a lone, defiant figure between the greed of men and the grave of his wife. But Cale did not move. He simply turned his head slightly, his gaze fixed not on Corbin, but on the far canyon wall. He let out a low, carrying call, a sound that was less human and more like the cry of a hawk. Corbin chuckled. What's that? Calling your friends? It's a little late for that. A voice, frail but determined, shouted from behind them. No, Corbin, it's you who's late. Everyone turned. Trudging up the dusty track from the direction of town was a small procession. At its head was Mr. Abernathy, the storekeeper. He wasn't carrying a rifle. He was carrying his heavy leather-bound ledger. Behind him were a dozen other townsfolk. The blacksmith, the farrier, farmers Jedediah recognized. They were armed with pitchforks, hammers, and a grim, newfound resolve. They looked terrified, but they were there. Corbin stared, his condescending smile faltering for the first time. Abernathy, what is the meaning of this? I own you. I own all of you. Abernathy stopped, his chest heaving from the walk. He held up the ledger like a shield. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Corbin. You don't own us. You own our debt. There's a difference. He flipped open the book. For the last 29 days, we've done as you said. We shunned Jedediah. We refused him credit. We acted the part of cowards. But every time one of your men came into my store to boast about cutting his fence or fouling his well, I made a note. Every threat, every act of sabotage, it's all here. Witnessed, dated. This was the first twist. The timid shopkeeper, the man who couldn't meet Jedediah's eye, had become the town's scribe, its conscience. His fear had been a mask for a deeper courage. Corbin's face hardened into a snarl. That book means nothing. My men have rifles. What are you going to do? Throw your groceries at them? He gestured to Pike. Deal with this rabble, then get the gold. Pike raised his rifle, pointing it squarely at Abernathy's chest. The townsfolk flinched, but none of them ran. They had made their stand. And then the second reversal unfolded. From the ridge opposite Corbin, a single figure rose from behind a boulder, then another, and another. In the space of 10 silent seconds, the entire ridgeline was filled with them. Not 10, not 20, but 100 Apache warriors, their faces painted for battle, bows drawn, lances glinting in the dawn light. They moved with a chilling silence, a living wall of retribution that had materialized from the very earth. Corbin's men froze, their rifles suddenly feeling like children's toys. Their eyes were wide with a primal fear Jedediah knew well. Cale stepped forward, his posture transformed. He was no longer a weary traveler, but a figure of immense authority. He spoke, and his voice was no longer quiet, but a command that echoed across the valley. Bartholomew Corbin, he declared, his English sharp and regal. This land you seek to steal was never yours to buy. 100 years before your town was named Redemption, it belonged to my people. The headwaters you covet are sacred to us. This man, he pointed to Jedediah, showed honor when your people showed none. He gave water to a thirsty man and shared his bread when he had none for himself. He did not know that the man he saved was Kalek, son of the great Chief Black Moon. Corbin stared, speechless, his empire of paper and threats dissolving into dust before his eyes. He was no longer a predator. He was prey, caught in a trap he never knew existed. The town's silent protest had not been for Jedediah alone. It had been a coordinated delay, buying time for Kalek's message to reach his people. Jedediah looked from the warriors on the hill to the townsfolk by his side, and finally to Caleb. He understood now. He had never been alone. His one small act of kindness, his refusal to surrender his humanity, had been the spark. The community, both the one he knew and the one he never suspected, had been waiting for that spark to ignite their own courage. The standoff broke. The townspeople, their fear burned away by the sight of their new allies, surged forward. The blacksmith wrenched the rifle from Pike's hands. Abernathy and 2 other men tackled Corbin, wrestling him to the ground. The fight was brief and decisive. Justice, it turned out, was not a matter of contracts and loopholes. It was a matter of courage and community. By the time Sheriff Miller arrived, puffing and red-faced, Corbin and his men were bound and sitting in the dirt, surrounded by a silent circle of Apache warriors and determined townsfolk. Seeing the undeniable shift in power, the sheriff promptly arrested Corbin for conspiracy, coercion, and attempted theft, his weaselly face a mask of sudden, profound civic duty. In the weeks that followed, the gold from Jedediah's land did more than just pay off his mortgage. He used it to buy the redemption savings and loan, and his first act was to forgive the debts Corbin had held over the town. The gold built a new school, irrigated the valley, and turned Sarah's dream of a paradise into a reality for everyone. Jedediah and Caleb forged a new treaty between the town and the Apache, one based not on paper, but on the mutual respect between 2 men who had seen the best in each other when the world showed them its worst. The valley thrived. Months later, Jedediah stood at Sarah's grave. The cross was no longer dusty. It was made of polished oak, and around it grew a garden of wildflowers he had irrigated from the creek. The town of Redemption bustled with life below, a testament to what they had all built together. "Well, Sarah," he murmured, his voice no longer rough but full of a quiet peace. "It's more beautiful than even you imagined." He wasn't holding on to a promise anymore. He was living it, and he knew that the true treasure he'd found wasn't the gold in the ground, but the courage that had been buried in the hearts of his neighbors all along. They proved that the courage of one can ignite the strength of many. The spirit of the West lives on in tales like these. To hear more stories of unlikely heroes and the communities they inspire, subscribe to our channel and become a guardian of their legacy.